Welcome to The Secret Diary of a Producer, the podcast that pulls back the curtain on the production of some of the greatest shows on television. Today, we're stepping behind the scenes of one of the UK's most iconic and much-loved series, Dragon's Den. For years, millions of viewers have watched hopeful entrepreneurs walk into the lair, pitch their businesses under the spotlight, and either walk away with a life-changing investment or nothing at all. First broadcast in 2005, it has become a staple part of the British landscape, as familiar as the Antiques Roadshow or I'm a Celebrity. Originally a Japanese format called The Tigers of Money, over the years it has been refined and tweaked to be the version that it is today. Ceri Aston is the former executive producer of Dragon's Den and came up with one of the most iconic moments of the series. Ceri, welcome to the Secret Diary of a Producer podcast.
Thank you very much.
How are you?
I'm good.
Excellent.
I'm good. Yeah, delighted to be here.
It's a very unique format because it's unlike anything else, really. And actually, in terms of where we're at with social media and so forth, it's really ahead of its time, because when it first came out, I think in every episode there were 10 pitches, and then it became less as time went on. And so essentially you just had, it was a bit like a scroll, wasn't it? Because you had someone goes and does a pitch and and then someone does another pitch and and it's kind of like hit, and it is very intense in that way. So it's actually modern for today, but it was completely different when it first came out, wasn't it? It was a totally revolutionary type of show, I think.
Yeah, it was. And I obviously I wasn't there at the beginning of Dragon's Den. I went in the mid-noughties.
So it was very well established. It was much loved. I think it was still on BBC Two at the time.
Yeah.
It hadn't made that move over to BBC One yet. And you're coming in. What did you want to do with it? Like what was your, because you also think, how do you it's already really successful, how can I make it even more successful? What was your thought process behind that?
Yeah. Because women have self-imposter syndrome in television and we walk around with this kind of paranoia bubble above our heads, I remember saying, "Oh, have you given me this because it's the last one?" That was kind of like my immediate sort of thought, but that's just self-imposter nonsense, because clearly it's amazing and it's gone from strength to strength. And I was assured that wasn't the case. But because in my mind, I had to think of it as a new thing I was taking on. So that meant that I had to do something to creatively renew it. And I kind of watched it, and I loved it as a viewer, and I was so honoured to work on it, because it was, not only one of the most recognisable brands in telly, full stop, it was certainly the biggest thing coming out of Manchester, and I was at the helm of it, and that was brilliant. But I kind of felt like I wasn't going to be timid about it. I thought, if I'm going to take this on, I feel like I need to look at it and work out what it is that isn't working for me, and then work out what the BBC will allow me to do with it. And one of the things that used to annoy me a bit, actually, about it when I watched it as a viewer, was the dragons would sort of be lined up on their chairs, and there was like a staircase there, and the people would come down the staircase, and the dragons would kind of be staring ahead. And it was sometimes funny if the person was struggling to get down the stairs with a particularly awkward piece of kit. But generally, it just felt telegrammar wrong to me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like,
definitely. Yeah.
I don't get
it's awkward.
why.
It's a bit awkward, isn't it?
It's awkward. And, it didn't really feel that inclusive either, if I'm going to be honest. It's like you have to go down a flight of stairs to get into the den to pitch. So it kind of felt like I wanted to put a bit of a kind of a curtain going up moment on it. And also I kind of felt like if you're navigating a staircase, you're not really seeing the nerves and the tension, and let's face it, the fear in some cases of having to go and do what you're about to do. So I wanted somewhere that you could sort of capture that and hold that a bit. So in that first series, we put the lift in, but then we went on in the second series that I looked after to actually build a lift lobby. And I think it's got even bigger since then. I think that set's got a bit bigger. but yeah, it was all about, that's what I kind of felt like that's what was missing for me. I felt like at the time, we had, big sort of tense, life-changing hits like X Factor and all of those shows. And I kind of felt like Dragon's Den, despite my factual background and this being a brilliant show for me to work on, I felt like it needed that kind of entertainment spark that was missing a little bit.
Yeah.
And how can we do that in a way that subtly shifts the format but doesn't alienate the die-hard fans?
Yeah, because I think, Dragon's Den runs on sort of key points of drama, doesn't it? There's a real grammar to that drama and what the sort of expectation is. And actually, what was happening before when they were going down the stairs is that there was the key moment of drama is when they meet for the first eyes and they clap eyes on each other and they think, oh, we're going to invest in this guy, and they think, am I going to be able to swim him to invest in me? It's like a very critical moment, and it wasn't. There was no occasion around it. It wasn't maximised from a dramatic perspective.
No.
It was kind of thrown away.
Yeah.
So by putting that lift in and having, you talked about curtains going back. It's the same process as curtains going back, isn't it? It's doors opening.
Yeah.
You really dramatise that early moment as a sort of marker of what's to come.
Yeah, and I just think that, if you think about the most nerve-wracking job interview you're ever going to have, when you walk into the room to be interviewed by the person, they're normally sitting over there, and you're walking in and you're going to clap eyes on them, and then you've got to sit down and you've got to face them off and you've got to talk to them. It's not very often that you would be coming down a staircase at the side of them. And I just kind of thought, what is that really kind of simple, relatable moment that, we don't have to go into Dragon's Den to feel. And we've all had job interviews or had those kind of awkward encounters that make us nervous. And I just wanted to kind of do that. And it feels like such a small thing, but I think it came quite a big thing for the show.
I think not just for the show, but we in the conversations that I've had about formats over the years, there's always been people say, but what's the moment when the lift opens? It's a sort of byword for what is that sort of opening mark of drama. So, and we have you to thank for that.
Well, me and Steve Hanley.
You and Steve Hanley.
I just wanted this moment of you in this lift, pacing up and down, knowing that any minute those doors are going to open and all of those dragons will be staring at you.
Yeah.
How does that feel? What can you capture? How do people react in those moments? What's their kind of, prep? Are they absolutely crapping themselves? Are they very zen about it? And I think the very first pitch that we filmed, actually, no, it wasn't the first. It was on the first day, and we put it in the first episode. Some guy came in, and he had some gluten-free noodles, like a gluten-free noodle product. And he decided that he was going to do a live cookery demonstration. And Kelly Hoppen was one of the dragons that year, and she's famously gluten intolerant. And she gave him a really hard time over whether these noodles were gluten-free or not. And he just froze, and he turned around and ran back into the lift. So we're sitting in the gallery going, close the doors, close the doors. And then all the dragons were just sort of sitting there going, is he going to come back out? And he's just pacing up and down in this lift. And we realised that we'd actually given somebody a bit of an escape chamber. Yeah. And he, in fairness, is the only one who ever did that, to my knowledge, certainly in the shows that I looked after. But it was such a moment, and it happened in the first few days of us filming with this new set. And I remember we went down and sort of opened the lift at the other side and said, "Are you going back in?" And he went back in, and Peter Jones read the room and invested in him. It was a happy ending.
Right.
But yeah, it was interesting what that lift gave us content-wise.
Yeah.
And, Deborah Meaden had just done Strictly Come Dancing. So I think one of the very first pictures we put on was, the sort of swing dance, forgotten what era it's from, the sort of, there was somebody who had a business where he wanted to sort of roll out sort of these particular dance classes as a bit of a franchise. And they literally all burst out the lift. So the doors opened, they burst out the lift and started dancing. And I kind of felt like that I always wanted the curtain to come up, and it's just come up.
Yeah.
And it worked really, really well. So we could see instantly that it was just not going to go anywhere. But we were also very intrigued to see how it would be received as well.
So we've got the lift, so it's all going splendidly well. So to go back to casting, when you cast for this, to what extent is it? I'm sure people apply for it, I know, but presumably you have to go out and find people as well, and it's sort of a balance of the two. How do you know what are you looking for in a cast to make those pitches really work and get the right mix in an episode?
Well, I mean, obviously I can only really talk about it from the time that I was on it. And actually it was an interesting time because we didn't have AI then, there wasn't those kind of businesses, but people were starting to come through with apps mainly, actually. And it was really interesting because from a visual storytelling perspective, it was never that easy to make those interesting. And also we weren't, as a nation, we weren't sort of, they weren't as much a part of our lives as they are now. So it kind of felt quite new. So there was that to sort of grapple with, and that was just starting to come through. And then the other thing that was starting to come through, which hadn't really been there before, was people were coming in with angel investors already attached.
Right.
And they were often the tech-based businesses. So that was quite a big thing that was new, and we were always trying to think about how you make those pitches entertaining because, they would often be standing next to I remember us having a bit of set built, which was basically, I look at it now and I just think, gosh, actually it was a bit, rubbish, but it was like a very large mobile phone and they just sort of stand next to it and talk about the app. And yeah, it was never exciting when those businesses came in. You much rather have, the food-based business, or I always loved the kind of the garden shed engineers.
Yeah, with an invention of some sort.
That had a patent. I never know how to say that. For something just extraordinary. I used to love all of those. But I think the kind of casting now isn't hugely different to what it was then, in the sense that you did always want to go for an amazing backstory. You wanted to understand what these people had gone through, or what had, to get where they are, or what they'd sacrificed, or, and sometimes those sacrifices from a business perspective were really shocking to the dragons. Do you know what I mean? It was like, they could have remortgaged their house, they could have taken out huge loans. And, they think that they are doing it because they have this dream and it's for the good of their business and what they believe in. And they're having to hear, all these exasperated dragons say, what did you do that for? So yeah, it was about backstory. It was about variety as well. It was about making sure that there was a really good mix of ideas with different sort of, genres. So tech, food, sports, wherever, it had to feel like a palette of lots of different things. You wouldn't have 2 food products in the same episode or anything like that. So it was getting that mix, and actually, often when you're casting, you're going for people who are confident, and but without wanting, we weren't making cruelty television, but actually nerves were brilliant on Dragon's Den. If you forgot your numbers or you didn't even know them before you walked in, if you freeze, if you need to go and walk to the back of the den and think about it, those were real moments for us. So actually, even though they would audition, they would come and be filmed pitching.
Okay, so they'd have to audition with a pitch, really?
Yeah,
right.
I think that's still the case.
Right. Okay.
So they'd come to Manchester or London because that's where the production bases were, and they would be filmed doing a pitch, and we would help them out as much as possible, but ultimately the decision will only ever be down to the dragons. It's their real money, and we can't get involved in that in any way. So So I think, that's ultimately what we went for with casting. But we were very lucky in the sense that we could go for the whole gamut of emotions. We could have somebody who wasn't as confident because that was kind of part of the story.
Kaleidoscope for all, yeah.
Somebody who's unable to really properly describe something that's actually quite good.
Yeah.
You've kind of got this idea, but you're falling apart.
Yeah.
That was a really good story.
And when the dragons will then tease, when they sort of see the nugget of something there, and then they tease it out of them.
Yeah.
And go, but this is brilliant. And they go, oh, yeah. And then suddenly it was this kind of lovely moment. There were lots of lovely moments. There's a lot of emotion in it as a series as well, which, considering the format of it and the fact that it is, these people are together for a relatively short period of time, the fact that people can get emotional about it, and there are scenes of Peter Jones, getting a tear in his eye over something, over a story or whatever it might be, that again is quite extraordinary based on the fact that it is it is hit after hit after hit after hit of a different pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's why you need the variety of pitches, because you need to make sure that everything feels different. Do you know what I mean? So like, if you've got a whole episode that you've constructed, you've got to, every pitch you go into can't feel like you're just going over the same things, because trust me, those same things will have been covered.
Yeah.
Because, the dragons are doing real-time due diligence. Clearly they go and do due diligence after they've invested. But in order for them to kind of agree a deal, they have to interrogate and get as much out of it. And there's loads of repetition, really, across all those pitches. And it's our job to make sure that everyone feels like it's giving you a slightly different thing. And that's not just the product, it's the interrogation as well.
Yeah, I think when you were just talking about a minute ago, it made me think that it's a story, as well as it's a story about business and how well you can pitch, it's also a story about people's dreams, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's about, they've had this dream and they wanted to do it, and this is their, an opportunity, possibly a last opportunity to see their dream come to some sort of fruition or move to the next stage.
Yeah.
And so there's an enormous amount invested in it by a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's very powerful as well, I think.
And it can be like criticising your kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember there was one guy, he'd invented a thing that went on the end of a cucumber, and so that it stopped the cucumber from spoiling in the fridge, because sometimes the end of the cucumber goes off, and they were like, well, it's great, but like you can't patent it. It's not really going to be a big seller. And he was so passionate about this cucumber thing that he had. Yeah. And in a sense, but the kind of, you could feel it was a very accessible emotion, because although they sort of said, well, none of us are going to invest in it, it was a very, what this individual had put behind that idea for whatever reason was very strong and powerful, I think.
And I think that, it is interesting when you look at, sort of entrepreneurs and business influencers saying, what's your dream?
Simon Squibb, what's your dream?
Squibb,
yeah.
I love his content, by the way, but you kind of feel, don't you, that, that's all about, you can be the cucumber guy and you can have that dream, and don't listen to anyone else if this is what you think, So in some ways, that kind of precinct is interesting in what, when you think about it in parallel to what's going on.
Yeah, it's a route to a different life. Yeah. And I think that's why it's one of the reasons why it's so good. So we talked about the sort of casting and so forth and why that works. Let's talk about the dragons for a minute, because my goodness, the dragons, because they're such incredible sort of figures. And again, one of the reasons why Dragons Den is such a brilliant construct is because you've got your protagonist and you've got your antagonist, and one has to overcome the other. And they, as a sort of force to come up against, they're so well cast. Are they that severe in real life, or is that kind of a caricature that they make?
I think what you see is who they are.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know whether that's the answer you wanted to hear.
No.
But it's, I honestly do. Because, what we're not doing with Dragon's Den is they don't have earpieces on. We're not directing them.
Right.
We're not speaking in their ears. If they want to spend 3 hours interrogating a business because they're thinking they might put 250k into it or whatever, then we've got to let them do it.
Right.
editorial policy. It's important, you
And,
know.
and would they do that? Because
Yes.
really?
Yes.
Because my experience with sort of very high flying entrepreneurs is that time is so important to them that actually the less time that they something take, the better in a way, because actually they've got so many other things to do. But they really kind of go into this in great detail.
Yeah, I mean, not every pitch would take that long.
Sure.
You know, some would go by in a flash.
Right. Okay.
And I think the more that I kind of, because obviously the process of getting those pitches on air is that people apply or we go and find them.
Right.
They then apply, you audition them. We have researchers who do due diligence on the businesses, and you would have to make the decision about whether you felt like, A, the story was going to work, you've watched the audition tape, what kind of personality and character are they? You know, what's the idea? How entertaining is that? How fascinating is it? How groundbreaking is it? What's been their personal journey to get there? How many of the food items do we have? You know, can I try some? We'd often have samples.
So you'd have to be like an imaginary dragon.
You'd have to be an imaginary dragon. So and then you started to get tuned in to what you thought the dragons would say, because you get so used to hearing them, and it's because you can often watch them for that length of time in the gallery.
You get to know their minds.
You get to know how their minds work. So you're sitting there and you're thinking, we all know what Deborah Meaden's going to say about that. She's going to ask about animal testing. She's going to ask about the green credentials of that. Peter Jones is going to get really annoyed by that because he won't want to share that investment with 6 other angel investors he doesn't know. Duncan Bannatyne will probably be asleep. I'll wake him up. He won't mind me saying that, by the way. We were always like Duncan. I did a whole montage once. When he left the den, we did a Goodbye Duncan montage, which is mainly him being prodded to be woken up.
So wake up.
Yeah. So the fact that you had the, I'm going to say the luxury, it didn't feel like that sometimes because you just needed to get entrepreneurs through the set and they were taking way too long from a program maker's perspective. But I think that made the show better because you really got to understand how they all ticked.
I think what the most I've needed is probably naivety actually of me, is that I guess I sort of had it in my head that the pitches were done knowing that you had to hit a series of TV beats as part of it. But actually what you did is you did a real pitch, an actual real pitch, and then you just covered the whole thing really, really well, and had prepared for it really, really well, and then kind of let it play out.
Yeah.
Which interestingly, when we were talking about Virgin Island, it was quite similar because again, that wasn't produced. They just let it happen, and they produced a scenario, and then they just let it roll in an ob doc type way, and then did it. So it wasn't overly messed with. At all.
Yeah. And I think that's why, well, Virgin Island's brilliant, but I think that's why Dragon's Den's brilliant.
Yeah.
Because you're watching something that actually was very real at the time.
Yeah. And the dragons, I mean, they're always competitive. Being competitive is the nature of being an entrepreneur, and particularly a successful one. And sometimes they do get very heated in the show when somebody doesn't, or they don't think someone's right, or whatever it might be. Did you have to handle them as egos, or were they actually, that's what we do when we're on camera, but then when they're in sort of normal world, they're actually much easier to manage?
No, I didn't have to handle them as egos at all. I mean, as I say, they were the people that you see on the show are who they are in real life. And the biggest issue all the time with the dragons, particularly Peter Jones, was he was always so busy.
Yeah.
And I used to just think, so like he would have meetings at lunchtime, and he'd be on the phone a lot, because he had a lot going on.
So did you ever have to choose a new dragon?
I did. So when I came on board, we had Peter Jones, Deborah Meaden, Duncan Bannatyne. So there were 2 dragon chairs to fill. And if you remember, Theo Paphitis always used to sit in the middle.
Yeah.
So I instantly just moved Deborah into the middle because I kind of thought, right, we've got our OGs, we've got everybody knows these guys, these are Dragon's Den. And I kind of thought it works symmetrically. I mean, you can't move Peter Jones anyway because he's too tall. You just have to, I said, you've got to stay where you are, Peter. I can't put you in the middle. It would look ridiculous. It would sort of
Christmas
go like
tree
this.
esque.
Yeah. So he stayed where he was and he was very happy there. Duncan was always at the end anyway, so he was fine with that. I put Deborah in the middle and I'm like, I'm going to put the two newbies either side of you, and that would work. So we brought Piers Linney in. He'd just on Secret Millionaire for Channel 4, so he was sort of on our radars. He brought something else to the show. I like the fact that he was, from the north. I like the fact that, he was from quite a working class family, from a mixed race family. He was one of the youngest dragons the show had ever had. I'm pretty sure he was the youngest. So he was a kind of an interesting hire. I remember there was a pitch that came in that Peter Jones and Piers Linney were both fighting for. And Peter Jones turned around to Piers and went, "What do you think you could give him that I couldn't?" Peter Jones. And Piers Linney just goes, "Youth." And I thought, yes.
Wow. There's a line.
There's a line.
Did he come back to him with anything?
No.
That's like drop the mic.
Yeah. So that was good. Kelly Hoppen had already been booked before I came in, but she was interesting because obviously, she came from a very particular world. They've since gone on to have Sarah Davies. And I've loved over the years how they brought people in from different industries. I love what they're doing now actually with the guest dragon. But I also booked Moonpig Man, Nick Jenkins, moonpig.com, and found out that Moonpig was his nickname at school.
Oh, really?
Yes, that's why the company was called that. He sold it now. He's not involved in it anymore, but he was fabulous. I booked Sarah Willingham, who'd been on a competitive format with Raymond Blanc, which was called The Restaurant, and loved Sarah. She came from the food and drink world. So yeah, it was brilliant to sort of, go into all these industries and find these people. And the thing to sort of really impress upon dragons when you're trying to cast them is this is real. It's your money. You are expected to commit to investing, because what's the point otherwise? It'll be time consuming because you're going to have to manage these businesses afterwards. And you've kind of got to go into it with knowing that you've got to give that commitment, and you've got to have the money to invest. So there's some due diligence to do that.
Yeah. And did you have problems finding people, or were they generally very keen to do it if asked?
I mean, not everybody wants to do it.
Right.
Mainly for the kind of time commitment. As I say, you've got Peter Jones, who's kind of continuing to sort of run this huge empire, having business meetings, people turning up at set, squirreling off to meeting rooms. And he was always on set. He always did his job. But, you could just sort of see the busyness around that. But, he did it. And that wasn't for everybody. People did turn me down because they sort of thought, well, I don't know whether I can give that time. And I don't know whether I can give the time to the entrepreneurs if I invest in them.
Yeah.
So that puts a lot of people off. Yeah,
I suspect it is easier to do it now than it ever was before, because obviously personal branding has just become so important. And again, this was kind of doing it 20 years before personal branding for business people was actually happening. I mean, it was, way before the days of LinkedIn and everybody putting their profiles up saying this is me and this is what I do, that they were building personal brands on Dragon's Den.
Absolutely. And I don't know how easy it is to cast dragons now, because I'm obviously not involved in it, but the fact that they've kind of got this quite nice little thing where they have guest dragons shows that maybe there is more of a willingness, because of what you've just said, to be on it than there was back then.
I think I've heard a lot of sort of financial influencers on TikTok and so forth talk about how for them the biggest thing they could ever get is to be on Dragon's Den. I mean, they just dream of being on Dragon's Den. Doesn't matter if they've got 2 million followers on TikTok. For them, it's about being on Dragon's Den.
Well, it's interesting because Stephen Bartlett
started his TV career on Dragon's Den.
Yeah. And there's not a lot that Stephen will do on television.
Yeah. So what was, for you, what was the most memorable pitch of your time in charge of Dragon's Den?
Well, I mentioned the Noodle Man before. Ross, Bare Naked Noodles. He did the live cookery demonstration, which, who does that? I mean, hats off to him. And he was the one who ran back in the lift. And Peter Jones invested in him. And it was one of those moments where it's like, we talked about Britain's Got Talent. It's the golden button. Peter Jones might as well have hit that golden button at that point. Everybody was just like, what? That pitch fell apart, He ran away. And we captured all that because we had the lift in which we could capture it. And he still got investment. And that will always stick out in my mind. It's funny, actually. I was on LinkedIn the other day, and there was a guy on there who was on a podcast. He's a founder of some big company, and he was talking about the time he went on Dragon's Den, and with a male leggings brand.
Wow.
And it was one of mine. I remember having these male lycra leggings for men, not for the gym, not for running.
Right, just for,
you could wear a pair now.
Newsagents or supermarkets.
Yeah, exactly. But with black
I've always
patterns.
wanted a pair, actually. I've always thought it would look
Yeah, you'd look brilliant in them.
Warm
Proper little patterns and
basically tights.
I mean, look, I actually think nowadays it would be completely fine.
I'm sure.
But back then it was...
radical.
And it's just stuff like that. It's not so much what's the most memorable pitch. It's the fact that you could have everything in one show. It was just the mixture of it all. Do you know what I mean? It was the cooking sauces that blew the dragons' heads off, or the time that Tuka Solomon, decided to try this bed and fell right through it. And, it's the people who come in and think they've got a patent. What do you say, patent or patent?
Well, I think it's is it patent UK, patent US? Would it be, because I think they always deal in patents in the US.
Right. Okay. So
no, I don't think it matters. We can use either.
One of those.
Everyone will know what I mean.
The kind of the inventor that comes in with one of those. I just think it was always for me the mixture. But the episode that we got nominated for the BAFTA for was the one that had Ross in, and quite rightly so.
So when you're making a TV program, ultimately you've got millions of pounds that you are basically responsible for, and the buck stops with you as the executive producer, and you're making decisions every day. It's a highly pressured situation. You're basically the CEO of that particular project, a multi-million-pound project for a period of time. How do you handle the pressure of being in that position and being that responsible in that way?
I think it's about having a really good team around you, but I also think it's about leading from the front, and I think it's about making decisions. I think where things spiral and go wrong on productions is where people prevaricate and they don't make, clear decisions, communicated clearly, and they don't keep people calm. And I've always been somebody, in whatever show that I've worked on, in whatever role, where I've always tried to lead clearly, concisely, decisively, and get everybody on your side. And I always say to them, whichever teams they are, I might not get everything right, but if we're working together, you will help me to correct the thing that I get wrong. And I did get some things wrong on Dragon's Den. There was two things I did. The first one was I once did an episode without any investments in it.
Really? By design? Or...
Yeah.
Oh, really? You try it?
I just got a bit carried away because I put the lift in. No, but what it was I did a whole episode where you thought there was going to be an investment. Every single one was right there. And it was just pitch after pitch after pitch after pitch.
And then you got to the end and you were expecting the big payoff and there wasn't one.
Yeah, and I actually thought that was a good idea.
Well, we should try things. And what was the response to the episode?
Oh,
Was it just frustration?
It was furious. And then the other thing that I did was...
But I can see the logic behind it. Because the other thing as well is you think, well, we're doing this every day and it's successful. But, you know, you've switched things up with the lift. That was a bold, innovative idea and it worked brilliantly. You think, well, let's try another bold, innovative idea and see what happens.
Yeah. I've had to go on points of view for that one.
Did you?
Yeah.
because what is it? Frustrated from Tunbridge Wells and writing in.
Frustrated from
saying,
all over the UK.
How can you have let us gone through this whole episode without seeing investment?
And I was like, but we almost got there.
Yeah. But it's just,
you were almost there. Everybody was at the end of their seats going, just invest.
Roll credits.
I know. Thanks for watching, says Evan Davis.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because the other thing that tells as well is that the power of the importance in a story of there being some kind of satisfaction at the end of it.
Yeah.
Like, you have to have it in some way or another.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you are left sadly, you know, you're so disappointed, aren't you? And I think sometimes, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a TV program, it's a movie, it's whatever it is. But you feel so disappointed in it. Yeah. It's disproportionate to what's just happened, right? So then you have to write into points of view and say, I cannot believe
and then I have BBC to say sorry.
I cannot believe the BBC has let me down in this way.
I know.
That's very funny. Cool. What was the second one?
Oh God, please. Oh, this was bad. Oh, God. Again, I was getting a bit carried away. I decided to have a separate room where family members or friends or business partners or other investors in the business could watch the pitch and react to it.
Sounds good. Not good? I don't remember that.
Well, I mean,
why was that? Why did that not work? I mean, that would sound like very, very clear, dramatic.
Well, I thought it was great because I remember there was a guy came in and he had a business which manufactured and sold those massive outdoor bean bags.
Yeah.
And it was a business that he was kind of employing his kids in.
Right.
And we had his children, his adult children, obviously, in this room listening to this pitch. And Tuka Solomon was basically saying to him, why are you employing your kids? You know, and really interrogating that.
Rhythm sort of thing.
And of course, they were sort of watching it going, oh. And so for me, I just thought this was
terrific. Sounds
good.
Great.
This is good. Yeah. But it was just a step too far.
Right.
For
it was
the
too
audience.
mean.
It was too mean. It was just a bolt on too much for that format.
Right. Okay.
And I got that. You know, I think we did it for a few episodes, and I can't even remember which series it was. But then we stopped it because I kind of went, this is, you know, we're not getting a good reaction to this. And yeah.
But it's quite, as a TV producer, that is a very, you know, sensible thing to do. And you look at that and go, that gives you all the kind of thing, the tick box things that you need for drama, interest, being emotionally engaged with the person who's going through the pitch even more because their family are there and extra layers of it. So I completely get it. I don't think I wouldn't say that's a mistake, but I also see that within the simplicity of what you've got, which is picture versus dragon, and it's just basically that duel essentially. If you bringing another thing might disturb the kind of purity of what you already have.
And I think, you know, what happens in the den is what the show is, and the moment you start creating parallel universes over here, it just becomes a bit you know. So that was a mistake, but I realised that.
And at the time the BBC they gave you the sort of latitude to be able to try these things out. I mean, that's great, isn't it? Really?
It was amazing
because you can't go and, as a producer, you certainly can't go and faff around with your formats now in that way. You know, I mean, a commissioner could do it, but as a producer, it's just not going to happen. No,
not at all. I mean, obviously, I had the support of the commissioner at the time, and you know, and we, you know, to put the lift in and then the lift lobby, and even that chamber. But yeah, it's
But Those were the days.
Those were the days.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so you left Dragon's Den in 2016?
Yeah.
And obviously you made lots of different shows since then.
Yeah.
What do you miss anything about Dragon's Den? Is there anything that you sort of think, oh, I really love that because was it one of your better TV experiences?
I absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
I love being excited by things, and I used to get up every morning and just look forward to going in. I loved it because it had a large team, everybody working hard at the top of their game, working together. I loved the tone of it. I loved the fact that it sort of, changed people's lives. And I loved the fact that I was able to creatively meddle with it, because I just didn't want to just walk into it as it was. I kind of felt like it needed a little bit of a spring clean, and I was allowed to do it. And that just made my enthusiasm for it all the more, really. And I think that, ultimately what I really love about it is everybody knows it.
Yeah.
Get in the back of any cab.
Yeah.
Everybody knows it.
Yeah.
What do you work on?
Yeah.
Well, you'll list a few things.
Yeah.
And they'll go, never heard of it.
Yeah.
Never heard of it.
Exactly.
Dragon's Den?
Yeah.
Like halfway down the CV. Dragon's Den? Oh, God, yes.
We've only seen one of those that's immediate name recognition.
Yeah.
I have the same thing. What might have you worked on I've heard of? Oh, the bus driver, Britain's cocaine kid. No, not heard of that.
Yeah, not heard of that one, but then you just...
But something else, I don't know, the big reunion or something like that. Oh, yeah, whatever it might be. So,
yeah.
No, I completely...
Yeah, it's just, and it doesn't matter, it can be such a diverse range of Uber drivers that have heard of Dragon's Den. They can be young, they can be old, and I just think it's one of those formats that can be watched by such a huge cross-section of the audience. And it's now, it's on BBC One now. I think the team that are on it now are doing an amazing job with it, but I kind of feel like those seeds of creative renewal were sown back then.
Yeah, absolutely right. And also interesting, my youngest son has been watching Shark Tank for years. And he just sort of found it on YouTube.
Yeah.
Just loves it, and obviously
that's very different.
It is, but it's based on the same Japanese format though.
It is, but they do those bolt-ons that are very different. They'll do backstories with the entrepreneurs at home before they, go in. So they do break out of the set a lot more than Dragons do. But we used to host so many, obviously it's a format that's rolled out around the globe, and we used to host so many international production teams because they'd all come to us to sort of watch us make it, and then take their own interpretation of that, change the animal, and give it a slightly different sheen. But yeah, I just love the recognition of it.
Yeah, I'm seeing so it's great. Tigers in Japan, dragons in Britain, sharks in America, lions in Germany.
Yeah. But it's a bit like when you see The Traitors, isn't it? And I'm always obsessed with the different coloured robes in different countries.
Yeah. That they do it with.
Yeah.
Is it as tense when you're watching it in the gallery or whatever as it is?
Yeah.
When you watch it at home.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I remember that very first time in the gallery. It was my, the first day of recording, big new job, got my smart new school shoes on. And I just thought, you know what, I really love this show. How is it going to feel being in it, being in the production of it? And I was gripped by it because obviously, you've got all the cameras on the dragons and you're sort of sitting there watching and you don't know what's going to happen. And you're shouting at the screens. Sometimes you're going, oh, for God's sake, like literally you've been doing this for 2.5 hours. Are you going to move on now? But you just don't know sometimes which way it's going to go. And you just get carried along with it. And that's another reason I love it. I loved working on it because I kind of felt like every day was just a bit of a roller coaster, and the tension that you get on screen, you definitely had in the gallery as well.
Wow, that's good. I think the dragons enjoy it as well, don't they? I
Yeah.
mean, that's the impression. You really get that impression.
Yeah.
None of them sit there looking like they're bored or that they don't want to be. They all kind of look really engaged with the process and really interested in it.
Yeah, they do. And, and obviously Peter and Deborah have been there. Peter the longest, Deborah not far behind. And we've talked about the commitment and, and how busy they are. And I just don't think you could do that unless you loved it year after year. They're investing their own money. People seem to think that, the BBC is giving them a nice big bucket of cash and that's what they're using to invest in the businesses. They're not. They're turning up and genuinely investing. So everything's real. I mean, the only thing that we might change around in the edit is the order of the I'm outs. That sometimes you'll sit and look at it and think, how can I not make this feel like the other one? So everything that happened, but I might have just slightly changed where people have said I'm out. But if there's a very particular, spiky moment where you feel like you're going to have to do quite a lot of duty of care around the contributor afterwards, then we work really hard to make sure that nothing in that pitch was not contemporaneous. There was not an eyebrow raise that wasn't really there.
Is that right? Because I think there's often a conception that they're edited sort of specifically to make the moments look more tense than they actually are. But actually what you're saying is that, no, obviously they're condensed because they're shorter.
Yeah, they're condensed.
But they are...
And you want to add the drama,
yeah,
of course, but you have to read the room in terms of, what you're able to do with who. We've had some really, not many, but I remember a few really difficult moments for entrepreneurs who had done something that had just absolutely outraged a dragon, and they're torn apart as a result of it. And and you just sit there and think, okay, when this is edited, it's got to be everything that happened in that room, because I feel like we'll be dealing with this beyond transmission. So yeah, but largely, just like you put a lift in, you are, and you condense the pictures down and you find your narrative way through it, of course you're heightening drama.
Was the response from people who went in and pitched and maybe didn't get the investment that they wanted or didn't feel that they'd enjoyed it? Was there a lot of pushback after filming, or was it?
Not as much as I thought there'd be,
right.
Actually.
Right.
I wasn't surprised by that, because I kind of felt like, the duty of care sort of handling was good back then. I think it's better now, isn't it? We have a much, as an industry, we think very differently about all that now, but we had it back then too. So, I kind of felt like people were looked after. They were looked after recording. They were looked after TX. And if there'd been a very difficult moment, we engage different protocols. So yeah, there wasn't, considering how raw that moment can be, I was surprised, actually. I thought we'd be dealing with way more contributors going, I just look like a fool. And but what's always fascinated me about Dragon's Den, and we've covered this earlier on, is that people believe in the cucumber holder. They really believe in it. So the fact that they've come in and the dragons haven't been brought along on that belief is their problem.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's just so fascinating in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, quite. And I think what's very interesting in Dragon's Den, and this is really about business more than it is about the program, is that the kind of there's a point at which delusion has to meet reality, isn't there, when you're doing a business? And yes, you're absolutely right. You need to be delusional to an extent in order to get something that might not be like Elon Musk with rockets. You've got to be delusional to an extent. But there's also the fact you've got to get to a point whereby you kind of like your delusion is so far from any form of it ever being a reality, you have to stop, because otherwise you're going to go mad. And that's quite a difficult point to read. And essentially, I think sometimes the dragons are sort of giving you that reality check early in your delusional path.
Yeah.
And they're saying to you, this is never going to work.
Yeah.
And you either listen to that and take it on board and think, actually, maybe they're right and I should move on to something else. Or you think, no, they're wrong and I'm going to prove them they're wrong. I'm going to carry on.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to take it to the next level.
Yeah.
And do it again.
Yeah.
And knowing when to do that and when not to do that.
But there are people doing that online.
Yeah. Yeah.
That whole FinTok thing you talked about, there are people doing that. As you say, you've kind of got this reality check going on here, and then these people online going, believe in yourself, do it. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I think one of the best, I mean, again, it's business, but one of the best piece of advice is that people say, look, you can easy to have ideas. It's really easy to have ideas. The hardest thing and the best thing you need to do is find a way of testing them.
Yeah.
And if you can test them and they work, then you're onto something, and then you can do the hard work, then you can believe in it, and then you can push it and push it and push it. But if you just have an idea and you just give everything to the idea without testing it, you could be onto an absolute hiding to nothing.
Yeah.
And spend an awful lot of time and money on something that's never going to see the light of day.
There's just one more idea that I've just remembered.
Go on.
Really gross. I just remembered it.
Okay.
So basically, this guy comes into the den and it's basically decking, but a table raises up from it.
Wow. So
you can have your food and then you can raise it back down to the decking. And I remember we as a production team thought, oh, that's space saving. That's good. And then literally in the first sort of minute of the pitch, one of the dragons went, you've just invented a clever way of eating off the floor. And we all just sat in the gallery and went, oh, God, of course.
Shit.
Who's going to eat off a table that everybody's just been walking over? But we were just like, oh, this is space saving. This is going to revolutionise people's small back gardens, no.
There's always the sort of practical application and then the emotional sort of thing of it. It's like, actually, I'm not. Yeah, no, quite.
So it kind of went from being this is a bankable investment to being, oh, this is not that.
Get out, leave. Ceri, it's been fantastic talking to you. I really enjoyed hearing about it, and I think what I've found the most interesting about it, and I don't know why I didn't quite know this, I probably should have done, is again, it was a bit like the conversation as I referenced earlier about Virgin Island, was I think some of the best content and some of the best factual entertainment programming comes when you have a construct, but then you allow it to be real within that, and that seems to be the sort of magic ingredient to me to having a dynamite proposition one way or another. And it's when you manufacture it too much that actually it just doesn't have that authenticity to it, and that's clearly what Dragon's Den did to an extent I hadn't quite known before. Actually, I'd always thought it would be made more for TV and that the Dragons would have been more in on making it for TV, but that's not the case. It's actually a real process that you capture. It really is that dramatic. You treat it as such, you reduce it, and that's it basically, which is kind of great, really.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So when Ceri came to Dragon's Den, it was already a successful format in its own right, and it was doing well in America and it was doing well in Japan. And she had to sort of think to herself, how can I take what's already there and is already clearly working for audiences and make it even better? And actually what she did in order to do that was return to a very, very familiar dramatic moment that's actually hundreds of years old. And that is the moment that the curtains open and the actors are on stage and they're in front of you and they're performing and it's happening. It's very, very dramatic. It's the beginning of the play, the drama, the theatre. And the way that she did that was, rather than have people, the people pitching walk up a stairs, she had them coming up in a lift and the doors open like those curtains open on stage, and they would enter and they would deliver their performance to the Dragons, who were this visceral audience, and would they or would they not buy into what was being presented to them. The other thing I really took from my conversation with Ceri was that the form of Dragon's Den, which is very, very simple, our protagonist arrives on stage, as we've discussed. does their pitch to the antagonist who says, yes, it's good, or no, it's not good. Yes, I'm going to invest, or no, I'm not going to invest. And then the story is over. It's very short, it's very vignette-y, and it's very snacky kind of television. When it first appeared back in 2004 in the early noughties, it was very, very new. This kind of snacky TV in this sort of way didn't really exist. But today, with TikTok and Instagram, snacky TV or snacky content is all over the shop. What we get on TikTok and what we get on Instagram is exactly the same as Dragon's Den was preempting way, way back 20 odd years ago. Short form content, in this case, packaged together in one episode and broadcast very successfully on primetime television. I think what it does say is that the relationship between short form content and long form content isn't necessarily as far apart as we all think it is.